everybody, my name is Jojo and thank you for stopping by the channel. So just wanted to make a video here on arcade restoration for beginners. Now this is going to be a tips and tricks video. I get a lot of questions in my inboxes on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, basically asking what materials that I use to get certain restorations done. So that's what we're going to do in this video. So basically I just want to mainly cover getting it prepped and ready for art, and then of course the next video that we do, we're going to do a part 2, and that's going to be on installation on the artwork package. So I kind of just want to go over real quick here on parts that I use, well, materials that I use, and of course I get all of my stuff from Home Depot as far as paints and primers and stuff like that. Everything else I outsource it from either Amazon, or I also do fancy Harbor Freight. We do have one here locally, and it is literally like 5 minutes for me. So first, now the main thing that I use as far as paint wise for the front of the cabinet, the back and the top and whatnot, is I like to use this Rust-Oleum here. Now this is a semi-gloss black. So now the front of the Midway Mortal Kombat cabinets, originally they did use vinyl, and since I don't fancy putting on vinyl, I rather just go ahead and put that, and for me that feels like, and it looks like, the closest you can get to it looking like it does have that vinyl wrap. Okay, so now as far as Bondo, of course I do use the regular wood Bondo, so that stuff right there works great. Now here in Texas it is extremely hot. We are in the second week of August, and let me tell you, it is very hot. We are in the weeks of, we're at 105 and higher. So that stuff, usually what I do around this time of year is that I will mix it inside the house and then bring it out and then go ahead and apply it to the cabinet whenever it needs to be. Now as far as sandpaper, now from Amazon I do order these boxes of sandpaper. It goes from 80 grit all the way up to 600 grit, and it's like 14 bucks for the box versus almost 20 bucks at Home Depot, and you only get like 10 of them. This one I think you get like 10 of each one, so it's a really great deal. So now as far as primer for the cabinet, now this right here is a little trick that I like to use. Now it is an automotive primer, but trust me, this does wonders. Now for me it takes a total of 6 of them to get a cabinet done. I will use 2 for each side of the cabinet, and then 1 for the front of it, and of course that's going to go ahead and get painted. The side, of course, the art will be applied over it. So basically what I do is I hit it with the layer of it, and then I lightly sand it with the 600 grit, and let me tell you, that puts it almost to a plastic. That's how smooth it is. So in this video we would do a complete breakdown on everything that I do to get the cabinets the way I do. So I hope you're in for a good video. Go ahead and stay tuned, and if you're new to the channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. So the cabinet that we're going to be using for this video is this Midway cabinet. So it started its life as an MK2, but I'm going to eventually convert it to a Killer Instinct cabinet. So all of this wiring, all the buttons, joysticks, everything has to come off. So let's go ahead and get this cabinet stripped to its bare bones. We're going to take off all brackets, nuts, bolts, screws, everything that we can see, so that way we can go ahead and get it down to the bare wood. So now I didn't record the process of stripping this cabinet down because simply I have a lot of videos of me already doing it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, take off all nuts, bolts, screws, coin door, monitor, brackets, and you'll be good to go. So now with taking off the art, I usually just use a regular heat gun. These here you can find at Home Depot, Lowe's, Harbor Freight. You can even find them pretty cheap on Amazon. So now there were some parts that I did have to use a scraper, some parts I did just peel off by hand, and there was some parts where I used a razor blade. So if you do decide to use a razor blade, just kind of take it easy and don't go too crazy with it, because it can dig into the wood and cause more imperfections and more trouble than you need. So on this part, just kind of take your time with it. So once all the art is off, you're able to overview the cabinet, look at all the imperfections. All these little parts here, you don't have to worry about it. The sander is going to take that off. You'll get to see any wood damage that's there. So after this part, flip it over and do the exact same on the other side. So again, you don't have to worry about any of the adhesive that stayed on from that artwork because the sander is going to pretty much take care of all of that. So just kind of overview the cabinet, make sure you got all of that art off, get all the bolts that are left on off, and then go ahead and start getting it prepared for sanding. So to get rid of that adhesive, I use a 120 grit sandpaper. It's not a crazy rough sandpaper, but it's just enough to go ahead and get any adhesive that stayed on behind of that artwork. So just go through the entire cabinet and make sure all that adhesive is off. Now this sanding part can get very time consuming, but of course you want to make sure that all that adhesive is off so that way the cabinet is as smooth as you can get it. So the bottom part of this cabinet did have some water damage. So what I did is I hit it with the 60 grit sandpaper so that way I can smooth it out with the rest of the cabinet. Now that 60 grit is a very rough sandpaper, so kind of let the sander do its work. You don't have to go too crazy or press too hard on it because you don't want to chip off any more wood than you have to. So after I got it as smooth as I could with that 60 grit, I hit it again with the 120 just so I can get it as smooth as the rest of the cabinet. So after you're comfortable with all the sanding that you did, kind of give the cabinet an overview so you can see all the nicks and dings and imperfections in the wood that you want to focus on when it comes time for Bondo. So with all of the corners that are damaged here on the cabinet, I like to get some thumbtacks and some cardboard. So what I do is that I thumbtack those pieces of cardboard up against that wood there so that way it can give me a straight edge, so that way when I apply my Bondo, I'm able to go ahead and get nice smooth corners. So this method for me tends to work very well. So this is what it should look like once it's done. It's not the prettiest, but of course it is going to come off. And it is of course going to give you those straight edges that you're looking for. So after that Bondo has had its time to set, go ahead and slowly start to peel off that cardboard. So now what you'll want to do to knock off all of that bulk, you'll want to hit it with a 180 grit sandpaper to knock off the heavy parts of that Bondo left behind, and then again go down to the 120 and then resand the whole cabinet and all the parts that you Bondoed. Now with these bottom corners, I tend to sand them with the sanding block. I feel that the electrical sander is just way too powerful and it'll start to chip off all of that Bondo you just applied. So this part, it is time consuming, but well worth it. So now that you took care of the crazy part, do the same on the edges so you can get nice straight edges. I tend to grab a Sharpie and circle all the main imperfections that I want to focus on. Now once you got all that crazy bulk taken off with the 180, go down to the 120 again and completely resand the entire cabinet. Again, getting it as smooth as possible. So before I apply my first coat of primer, what I do is I get a wet microfiber cloth and I go through the whole cabinet just to get off any dust or anything that was left behind during the sanding. So what I do is I apply its first coat of filler primer, let it sit, let it dry, and then I add the second coat. After that, I hit it with a 400 grit and I sand it smooth. So now with that 400 grit, you don't have to go too crazy on it. Again, just let the sander do the work for you. Also, that filler primer, what it's going to do, it's going to magnify any imperfections that you missed and that you can circle around and attend to afterwards. So after sanding with the 400 grit, that cabinet should be smooth to the touch. So now kind of go over the cabinet again, make sure you didn't miss anything before you jump to the other side. Now here on the front of the cabinet, we're dealing with pretty much the same thing as we're dealing with as the rest of the cabinet. Now we do have some screw holes that are here that we do have to attend to, but it's nothing that the Bondo can't cover. Again, go over the cabinet, see what you got to do, and then do the exact same steps as you did as the sides.
Now with the front of these cabinets, I like to take extra precautions with making them look as flawless as possible because I like to keep my cabinets all in the lineup. So of course these are the parts that are going to show the most. So take your time, make sure you do it right, and make it as nice as possible. Now with the other side of the cabinet, just run through it, do the exact same steps that you did as the other side. So now when I did this side of the cabinet, I had an idea of what it would look like if I put just a small layer of that Bondo through the whole cabinet. Turns out it worked really well. I started here on the middle of the cabinet because the top of the cabinet I did a test run and it made the cabinet look even more smooth. So depending on how bad that cabinet is, I would highly recommend this step. Now I don't have all of these special tools or have a big old room dedicated for just restorations. All my restorations are done right in front of my garage with just my essentials. My sandpaper, my sander, my paint, my primer, and my Bondo. So this video is pretty good proof that you don't have to have all of this fancy stuff to get a restoration done. Just work with what you got and you should be good. Now here on the front with that semi-gloss black paint, whenever you first apply it, it does look a navy bluish color, but when it does dry, it dries to that black color that you want. So what I do is I apply its first coat on the front, apply it on the back and on the top, let it dry, and then I come back and I add another coat. So now with the top and the back, I just simply sand it as smooth as I can get it. I don't go too crazy with it because no one's ever gonna see it, and plus there's no art that's gonna be applied here. So that black paint will make it look just as good. So now after applying that paint, letting it dry, this is what it should look like when you're done. So what I do with getting all the bolts ready for a new coat of paint, I just simply attach them to the drill. Only let the drill click once so it's not too tight, and so that way it doesn't mess up any of the threads. And I go ahead and start to sand it onto that sanding block. If you do it good enough, you can get these bolts to look pretty damn new. So after all the bolts are good to go, just go ahead and get all your brackets, sand them as smooth as possible, and then go ahead and give them 2 layers of that spray can spray paint. So the one that I use here is a semi-gloss spray paint, or you can also use a matte black. Either of them look good in my opinion. So now that those are good, let's move over to the coin doors. So what I like to do is completely strip these coin doors down so that way I can give them a nice bath in some soapy water. Now I just clean them with an old toothbrush and a regular rag. So that way I can get in all those little corners so we can take off any dust or anything like that that's lingering around before we give it its coats of paint. So now when painting the coin doors, I use the exact same paint that I use as doing all the brackets, just so that all of the metal pieces that are painted can all match. And I also do the same thing as I do with the roll-on paint. I do a coat, let it sit, let it dry, and then do a second coat. Now, depending on the order that you're restoring the cabinet in, I always save the box for last. So I didn't really record anything of me doing this because of course I did it the exact same way as I did the rest of the cabinet. Now once you're all done and everything is put together, this is more or less what your cabinet should look like, completely ready for art. So now if this video helped you at all, I'd appreciate it if you gave me a like. And if you're new to the channel, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. Now, I do plan on doing a second video on how to apply art, and if y'all would like to see that, leave it in the comments. Now, if you have any different methods that you used, leave them in the comments as well. Now, this hobby, it's all about sharing ideas and helping each other out. So if you do have any questions, just go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. Also, remember one more thing. It's not a race, and you shouldn't be in any type of rush to get one of these cabinets done. Just take your time and have fun. See y'all in the next video.